Hey, what's up guys? So Cobra just released the new RAD 490i radar detector, which is essentially a successor to their RAD 480i, which according to Cobra has been the best-selling detector in the United States, despite the fact that the 480i is honestly kind of a piece of junk. Now, luckily though, with the 490i, they've made some welcome and much needed improvements. Number one, they've improved the performance here in the detector, both in terms of long-range detection with improved sensitivity, as well as improved response time. Number two, they have improved the false alert filtering here of the detector as well. Number three, there's a new extreme mode in the detector that will further reduce the filtering to help boost performance. Number four, there's a new mount here that uses double stick tape instead of the double suction cup mount here that they've used before. And then number five, on the side of the detector, instead of having a barrel connector here for power and a micro USB port for firmware updates, there's now a USB Type-C port here on the side, which does double duty for both power and for firmware updates. Now, as for the biggest improvements here with the detector, that's going to be the improved performance and false alert filtering, and Escort has also released some test data that they can share to show the improvements. Starting off with response time, instead of taking around 2 seconds to alert with the 480i, which is way too long, with the 490i, this is going to drop down to maybe half a second or even a third of a second, depending on what radar frequency, what radar gun is being used, as well as what setting is being used in the detector. And half a second to a third of a second is way better than 2 seconds. Then when it comes to the improved sensitivity, they mention about a 5% improvement in range, which is not a big deal, though on the forum they mention closer to a 15% improvement. And then in terms of blind spot filtering in their testing, they find about a 20 to 22% improvement in quietness here with the updated model. And so as you can see, these are definitely some welcome improvements. But the big question is, how good of a detector is the 490i now in practice? Now, before I start sharing my opinions, I gotta share something here real quick. You see, last week, my doggy unfortunately passed away. He was my buddy, he was my boy, and his death was very sudden and unexpected. He's been my companion for the past 8 years or so, and he's been sitting next to me while I've been shooting my videos and sitting on my lap while I was on the computer editing them. And so obviously it still really hurts, but I don't want to necessarily take my pain out on Cobra, right, or their detectors. Like, it's not their fault that this happened. But that said, I definitely feel way less capable of sugarcoating things, and so I'm going to be much more direct about my experiences here compared to maybe how I would traditionally be in my reviews. And with that in mind, let's just start off here first with a quick TLDR of this 490i. To be perfectly straight with you, as I mentioned before, this 480i was a piece of shit. And the 490i, they've basically polished a turd. Yes, there's been some much needed improvements here to performance and filtering, but this detector still sucks. In my experience, I find that it still falses excessively to K-band, even on back roads. It falses to Ka-band as well, including on nonsensical, non-police radar frequencies, and without Ka-band segmentation, there's no ability to filter those out. I've also had the detector on multiple occasions mute legitimate police radar on Ka to the point where I nearly got a ticket running the 490i because it was not alerting me to a cop right in front of me shooting Ka. There's no GPS built into the detector, and so you're reliant on the Drive Smarter app to give you your low-speed muting and your GPS lockouts. But because the app does not reliably connect to the detector, your filtering is often going to be broken and non-functional. The real-time cloud alerts that you get from other drivers don't actually display properly on the detector, and then the Drive Smarter app that you need to use to get all of the cloud alerts or the GPS-based false alert filtering features, well, its privacy policy looks to be a disaster. So Vortex, tell me how you really feel. Personally, I don't care about the fact that they say that this has been the best-selling detector in the United States. That, to me, tells us there's a lot of people who've been buying junk. And while they've made some improvements here with the 490i, this is in no way a detector that I would want to run myself or recommend to others. And with that in mind, let me now start sharing a little bit more here about this new detector and why I feel the way I do here about this new 490i. Now let's begin here first by taking a look at the false alert filtering. Overall, I find this 490i to be pretty chatty here on K-band. In terms of blind spot falsing, I find that it falses to vehicles like Cadillacs, Hondas, Mazda CX-5s, etc. And it falses to those vehicles more than other detectors do. I've tested its new extreme mode, which reduces the filtering to give you improved performance, but I find that even on back roads it's chatty, so I don't really find the extreme mode to be all that usable. And so for that reason, I've been testing mostly around highway mode or a little bit less, but I've been pretty reluctant to drop down too much farther given the limited sensitivity that you have here on the platform either way. In fact, if I try to be ultra aggressive and run the detector in the lowest sensitivity mode, I still pick up false alerts from Mazda CX-5s surprisingly far away. This is a really common source of false alerts, and it seems like the 490i struggles with these falses more than many other detectors. Now, if you connect the detector to the app, it can use your phone's GPS to give you an automatic speed-based sensitivity option, but I find that even with the lowest sensitivity when you're at low speeds, it's still going to be giving you a surprising amount of false alerts. It seems like Escort's auto mode is much more aggressive at filtering at low speeds than even this 490i, which has less sensitivity than the Escorts. Additionally, I find that the detector falses to Ka-band as well, and often on nonsensical non-police radar frequencies. Now, normally we could knock these out by using something like Ka-band segmentation, but there is no option here with the 490i. We only have the option to sweep all of Ka-band or nothing, and obviously we want to leave Ka-band turned on. Furthermore, if you're relying on some of the muting features to try to keep it quiet, like Cruise Alert for its low-speed muting or the Quiet Drive feature, it can be sometimes too aggressive to the point where on multiple occasions I've had it actually mute legitimate KA from police officers, including, as I mentioned earlier, in one situation where I almost got a ticket to where I was starting to speed up from a red light and I saw the officer ahead of me and I looked over and I saw my detector alerting, but the detector itself was completely silent. And so I'm really not a fan of its low-speed muting or its unmuting characteristics. Now, I did more testing with this because I was assuming initially that it was just low-speed muting applying to both Ka and to laser, and it does look like it's going to be muting signals when you're below speed and not unmuting as you speed up. Worse yet, I've also had instances where it doesn't alert even when I'm over the low speed muting threshold. For example, in these tests here, I've got low speed muting set to 25 miles an hour, the speed limit is 35 miles an hour, and in one test I hit it when I'm doing 39 miles an hour and the detector is silent. And then a little while later, well after any alert latches have faded, I hit it again when I'm doing over 40 miles an hour, and yet again, the detector is fully silent. Now, troubleshooting this with Cobra, they mentioned that in a future firmware update, they're going to be removing low-speed muting from both Ka-band and from laser. And while that's certainly a welcome change, they gotta make sure that their detectors can alert reliably when we really need them. Now, as for the GPS-based filtering for things like low-speed muting and GPS lockouts, again, those are going to be reliant on your phone's GPS and using their app called Drive Smarter. And for the GPS lockouts, when you pass a stationary source of false alerts, like a speed sign on the side of the road or some shopping centers with those automatic door openers, you're going to tap the lockout button on the app to lock out those signals so it doesn't alert you again in the future. I also find that in shopping centers, you're sometimes going to have to create multiple lockouts because one lockout is not going to cover all of the door openers around you, and you don't have the ability to create a lockout by double pressing the mute button like you can do with a lot of Escorts detectors, and so you are going to be reliant on the phone to create all of your lockouts. Now, the Drive Smarter app itself is going to connect to the detector via Bluetooth, but I find that the connectivity with the app is actually really unreliable, which itself creates a lot of problems. For example, the app typically does not automatically reconnect to your detector every time you start the car, and so all of your false alert filtering, like your GPS lockouts and your low-speed muting, are going to be completely disabled. I do find there's sometimes when it will automatically reconnect if you get out of the car and you come back within a couple minutes, though even then certain features break, like the auto sensitivity will revert over to just running at medium sensitivity. But otherwise, typically it does not connect, and so you do have to manually fire up the app every time to connect to the detector. Secondly, if you take that app and you have it running in the background because you've got maybe Google Maps or Spotify or something else running in the foreground, you'll find that the connection to the detector will often drop, and for that reason, there's no longer going to be any more GPS information, and so it may display you're doing 0 or 1 mile an hour while you're actually driving at speed. And it means that if you're not getting those GPS updates, it means that your false alert filtering has silently failed. There's no more low speed muting, there's no more GPS lockouts, the speed limit display on the detector is no longer going to update properly, you're no longer going to be getting your red light camera and speed camera alerts because all of those features have silently failed. And in order to fix it, you have to first notice that and then bring the app itself back up to the foreground. Now, I actually really like having apps connected to my detector to add some additional functionality, but I really only like it for some of the bonus features, for things like maybe displaying the speed limit of the road that you're on. I don't like being dependent on apps for some of your critical core functionality like your false alert filtering because those features always need to work regardless of what's going on with your phone. Now, as for some of those bonus features, you also are going to be getting the cloud alerts shared in real time with other drivers, with other connected Cobra and Escort users. However, when you get those live alerts, they do not show up on the face of the detector the way they do with other Cobra and Escort detectors. The only place that you're going to see those alerts is going to be on the phone or on your CarPlay display in your car. And while I like having the CarPlay integration, I mean, it's kind of nice, again, it's not going to work if you've got the app backgrounded on your phone, and you're not going to be seeing it on the dedicated display here for the detectors, which is where I typically see all of the alerts. I think that's a bug because it does work properly on other Cobra detectors and other Escort detectors, so maybe that's just something that they need to fix here on the 490i. Now, chatting with Cobra about this, they said that live alerts are working for them on the 490i, so let's just go ahead and tag it real quick with KA. There we go, we've got our alert and it's audibly alerting properly too, which is good to see. And then when I fire up the Redline CI 360C, which also connects to the cloud, this one immediately detects this KA alert ahead of me, but you'll notice the Cobra again is going to be reporting nothing. Now, the Cobra is connected to the cloud over Bluetooth using my app, while the Escort is exclusively using Wi-Fi. I have Bluetooth disconnected temporarily, but as you can see, I'm getting the alert just fine here with the Redline CI, but not with the Cobra. So it does seem to be something specific here to this 490i. Your mileage... false alert again. Your mileage may vary here, of course. Maybe it's going to work for some people and not for others. I don't know what it is. I can't do my tests here based on just solely manufacturer's claims. I got to also do it here based on my personal experience. And again, based on what I'm seeing here, unfortunately, the cloud stuff is not working properly either. Additionally, all of your red light camera and speed camera alerts are going to be dependent on the app as well, again, because there's no GPS built into the detector itself. And as you approach a speed camera, it can actually give you a notification.
Caution, speed camera ahead.
That said, there's also sometimes some weird alert issues where it may say something like caution, caution area.
Caution, caution area ahead.
Additionally, I also find that sometimes alerts will get stuck on the phone or the CarPlay display long after they've disappeared from the detector. Maybe because of some of the Bluetooth communication stuff that I talked about before, but I even see that even when the app is running in the foreground. So I don't know what's going on with just all the quirky behavior here with their Drive Smarter app. And the solution that I find when I pass a red light camera, for example, and the alerts don't clear is to just fully power cycle the detector. That way that alert goes away altogether. On the flip side, I've also seen alerts that get stuck in the app that have long since cleared on the detector as well, and the only resolution to this is to restart the app itself too. Next, let's take a look at the detector's performance, and we'll start off here first with the test data that Escort has shared. Now, Escort and Cobra have recently started sharing some white papers here that go over their testing methodology here like this, as well as the test results they're seeing on their end, which is something that I actually really appreciate, and I'll link to this full white paper for you down in the description below. Now, taking a look, let's go ahead and start here first with response time testing. They test the RAD 490i, which as you can see, will take around 2-ish seconds plus minus or so to alert to different K-band and Ka-band frequencies. The RAD 490i, on the other hand, that's going to drop to just around half a second to maybe 0.6 seconds or so. And then if you switch over here to extreme mode, that's going to bring you down to around maybe 0.5, 0.6, down to like the 0.3 range, which is actually really impressive. And to give you some context of what that looks like, I grabbed my Stalker 2, it's a handheld 34-7 gun. And I grabbed a pair of cameras so you can see the perspectives here from both sides. And if we start here first in the high sensitivity mode, as you can see, it's actually doing a great job here. The response times are actually really good in practice. And then if we switch over and take a look at the extreme mode, as you can see, the results are once again pretty excellent. Now that said, it also falls to K-band while pointing off into the woods, I think because a car way off to the side of me was driving by and triggered a BSM false. And so while the filtering sucks in extreme mode, the performance is actually really nice. And then in terms of sensitivity, here's the improvements that they're seeing with the high sensitivity mode. And they're saying that on average here, it's about a 5% improvement on K and KA bands. Now, on the forum, they mention up to a 15% improvement in detection range, which I suspect is what you might see if you switch it over to extreme mode instead of high sensitivity mode. Now, that said, with the previous RAD 490i, the performance was pretty abysmal. You see, it was actually quite easy for the detector to not really give you any advanced warning and basically alert you when the detector enters the kill zone, meaning the time when the officer is able to acquire your speed. And in my mind, this was always one of the critical flaws I saw with the previous RAD 480i. Now, I can always, of course, go out and do some long-range testing myself, but given how small the performance gains are and how many other issues there are here with the detector, it's not really worth my time to go out and set up a dedicated test here for this, though in the future, for maybe other tests with a bunch of other detectors, I may toss it into the mix to see how it compares, but I think there's much more that needs to be improved here besides just a marginal improvement to sensitivity. Don't get me wrong, a 5 to 15% gain in sensitivity is certainly welcome, but the 480i is already a really low baseline to be starting with, and there's so much more that needs to be improved here besides a marginal gain to range. Next, let's take a look at laser capabilities. Now, a radar detector is going to be the wrong tool when it comes to protecting you from laser, but there are some interesting features here that they have on the 490i, specifically its ability to tell you the pulse rate of whatever the laser source is that you're getting hit with. It's not going to ID the make or model of the laser gun the way you'll see with like Uniden brand detectors, for example, but it is kind of nice that it's got the Whistler-esque feature to show you the pulse rate of the different laser guns. Additionally, I was out earlier doing a quick demo of the GPS lockout feature, and shortly afterwards, my ALP alerted to Polyscan. And surprisingly, the 490i also alerted to this as well, a little after the ALP did. And I say this is surprising because the escort detectors that I've tested with didn't actually alert to the Polyscan, though this Cobra did. Now, I wonder if this is because there's less filtering built into this detector. For example, I actually had it alert to a fire truck that was going by. It was alerting at 176 pulses per second, while I don't see any laser alerts from my other radar detectors or various laser jamming systems. Either way, though, I think it would be kind of cool to take the laser display info that's available here and maybe bring it over to some of the escort detectors and add some laser gun ID information the way you can do with some of their laser jammers. But that is kind of a surprising thing, like a feature that we see here from a lower end Cobra that we don't see on like a higher end escort. Now, as for the display of the detector, it's going to be using a black and white display. It's not a multicolor display or anything. And there's also no auto display brightness option, so you can't have it automatically get brighter or dimmer based on day or night. You do have to manually go into the detector and press the dim button here on the display to change it between bright or one of the dimmer modes when driving between daytime or nighttime. I also find that if you set the detector to the bright display option, after a little while, it'll actually drop the brightness down a little bit, which makes it harder to see, especially in the daytime or if you're wearing sunglasses. Though when an alert pops up, it will pop back up to full brightness. I've also seen a weird bug sometimes where when I go to manually change the display brightness to make it brighter, sometimes the speed limit display will actually get corrupted. I'm not sure what that's about. It looks like a drive smarter connectivity issue. You'll notice that it's also displaying 0 miles per hour and the detector is being muted, so any of my alerts, even though I'm on the highway, are going to be muted here as if I was still stationary. Fortunately though, if I notice it and bring the Drive Smarter app back up to the foreground, it'll reconnect to the app and my speed display and low speed muting will resume working properly too. Additionally, when it comes to the new mount here with the detector, they're using this double stick tape mount instead of the double suction cup mount that they've used for previous models, because of the fact that with these ones it can be a little bit harder to get the detector aimed. Again, regardless of what brand you're using, don't mount it to the sky like this. It's supposed to be mounted straight and level. And with this one, it's going to be a little bit easier to do that. You basically just loosen this dial here like this, and then you can just kind of like angle your detector and then just tighten this down once you're done. The detector also ships with this clear electrostatic film, which is kind of like a clear piece of tape that you stick to the windshield, and then this sticks to the tape. That way, in case you need to remove it in the future, you can just peel off the clear tape altogether, throw this away. You usually have to like replace the double stick tape here on the mount too, but it does make it easier to remove it without having the double stick tape actually stuck to the windshield itself. down the line. It's also worth noting that for my testing, I really did not want to test with this mount. So what I did is I just took this off, and then I grabbed the suction cup mount off of the 480i and attached it directly to the 490i here like this for testing. And luckily it's the same mount, so I was able to test. That said, I can see why they're wanting to replace this given how many times it just fell off the windshield and would not stick reliably to my windshield. And so for better or for worse, this is the mount that you're going to be getting here with the 490i. It doesn't also come with a suction cup mount, even though they are cross-compatible between different models. You'll notice it's also going to be a little bit taller and bulkier, and it's more permanent, which I don't necessarily like. But this is the mount that they're going to be shipping with now here for the updated model. Now, they're also going to be switching over here to USB Type-C for firmware updates. So if you want to update the firmware to add features or fix bugs or something, you're going to plug it into your computer and you're going to be able to update with both Windows and with Mac. Though I find currently if you go over to their website, there's no update software that's available yet here for this detector. Additionally, if you connect to it with their Drive Smarter app, it'll show you the current firmware that's loaded into the detector, and it can notify you when a firmware update is available, but you cannot update over the air using the app. You do still have to update over USB. And so as for my final thoughts here with this detector, I mean, overall, as you can tell, I'm not a big fan of it. It's based on a pretty lousy platform here with the 480i, which had poor performance, excessive false alert filtering, no GPS. Like, I get it that it's a budget detector and people like the price point. I totally get it. But despite some of the performance gains here, the filtering gains, I still find that the false alerts are still pretty excessive, both on K-band as well as on KA. The app that you need to use is problematic. There are some long-range detection gains, but they're pretty minimal and based on a detector that already has pretty lousy range. And so it's fundamentally not a detector that I would run or recommend that you run either. Now, I'm sure a lot of people are going to be buying it by and large because of its price point. I mean, the RAD 480i retails for $149. The RAD 490i retails for $20 more at $169. And if you're in the market for a detector under the $200 price point, I would probably recommend something like the Redenso XP, which you can pick up for $20 more. And one of the big advantages of the Redenso XP over the RAD 490i is the fact that it has GPS built in. So you're going to get your low-speed muting and GPS lockouts and stuff without being tied to an otherwise problematic app to get your critical core functionality. And I say this despite all of the annoyance that we have with Redenso and their release or non-release of Redenso Thea. For $20 more than what you get here with the Cobra, I think this would be the preferred choice for, you know, basic performance and false alert filtering, but again, have everything baked into the detector and not be reliant on some external apps. Again, I'm sure a lot of people are probably going to wind up buying this detector based on the price point, which is nice, and based on the marketing material and, you know, list of features that you'll see listed online, but the detector itself is still pretty lousy. And so, yeah, if you want to learn more about it, I'll put some links in the description to where you can purchase one of these detectors, where you can hop into the discussion area, where you can read more about the privacy concerns about their app, etc. All that additional information for you will be down in the description below. And so with that said, thanks so much for watching. I hope you guys are all doing well, and I'll see you in the next one.